Welcome back to the Downtown Den with me, Frank McKenna, the Chief Executive and Group Chairman of Downtown and Business. Delighted to be joined today by the leader of the Liverpool City Council Liberal Democrat Group, Carl Cashman. Carl, welcome to the Downtown Den. Thanks for being there. You've been here before, aren't you?
I have.
And let's just talk about where you see the city at the moment, Liverpool, because obviously there've been some controversies, and we're not going to talk about that for legal reasons, because obviously some of those things are still going through the legal process. But that sort of seemed to put a stop to any momentum the city had at the time. Do you feel as though commissioners now gone from the city council, Liverpool is getting to the place where it needs to be, or do you think there's still more to be done?
I'm very glad to be here, Frank, first of all. I admire you as an operator and as someone that has a very kind of insightful view of what's happening, not just in Liverpool, but, in the whole of the UK in terms of politics and business. So I think it's probably important to start with, where Liverpool's been, where Liverpool is, and then where Liverpool should be. So where Liverpool's been, obviously, as you laid out then, we've had all these controversies where there's been these land deals, there's been dodgy happenings with certain people and individuals, and as you say, we won't mention any particular names. So, Liverpool's been through the ringer in terms of what it's had to deal with, in terms of people that have been running the show, and actually in terms of a council that hasn't been very responsive to both people and businesses. So we've had to deal with that, and it's done massive reputational damage. So where are we at the moment? So we've got a council leader who I've got a lot of time for. I really like Liam, think he's a decent fella, but he's not going to set the world on fire. He probably was the person that Liverpool needed to settle things down. But I've always viewed Liverpool as a place that doesn't settle down or doesn't settle for second best. So in terms of where we need to be, the current Labour administration, the current leadership team isn't the right team to take Liverpool forward. And I would obviously argue that myself and my team are. But what does that mean? Like, where do we need to go in the future? Well, I fundamentally believe that Liverpool is a place that should be open for business. And that hasn't been the case over the course of the last probably 5 to 10 years, to be perfectly honest, Frank. Certainly in the last 4 years, where we've had this current administration, we've had so many businesses, and I've had contact with so many businesses that have told me, and we can't get things through planning. We've got no one to speak to in the council. The council seem to drag their heels on certain issues. And I just think that's unacceptable if a city wants to move forward. So what I would like to see in Liverpool is a complete step change that focuses on jobs, opportunities, ambition, and helping businesses to create those for local people. Now, I was told by Mike Story, and I fundamentally believe this myself, that it isn't the council that creates those jobs, opportunities, and ambitions. It is businesses. But what the council can do is be the facilitator in that process. And I believe that the council has still got the powers and the capability to do that. It just needs the right people running it in order to do that.
I suppose what the current administration would say is that they inherited quite a tough challenge. Commissioners, as you know, difficult to deal with because they are risk averse, and therefore they're not going to be given planning permissions out left, right and centre. And if he was sat here now, I think Liam Robertson would say, look what we've got in the pipeline. Are there particular things that you can see coming forward where you want to accelerate the momentum behind them? Stuff that we get frustrated by, for example, Festival Garden site we've been talking about since before you were born, probably. Then you're looking at things like Pall Mall, commercial office space. What is the narrative around Liverpool at the moment, at least in the sort of right place where you'd like to see, even if we accept that it's not gone fast enough? Do you think some of the ideas that are in the pipeline need to be delivered, or do you think that needs ripping up and almost starting again?
No, I think you're completely right, Frank. I think there's certain things that are there in the pipeline that I would probably argue is more driven by business than the council, that are the complete right thing for Liverpool. So if I mention like 3 things that off the top of my mind is something that we need to support but accelerate. So one is the Festival Garden site, as you say. Now, I'm not really sure that the plans for that are completely right, but I do support, housing in that area, and I think it's, a perfect location for housing. The type of housing is something I would probably question, to be honest, but that's probably a whole conversation on its own. The second is the amount of money that the Metro Mayor is being given for housing. Now, I worry that there's no real plan behind what he wants to produce with that housing. And I think there's massive opportunity, not only with the social housing sector, but with the private housing sector, to actually build the homes that the whole of the Liverpool city region needs, but more specifically, Liverpool. Big problem we've got, Frank, I think you would probably agree with, is the fact that in Liverpool, we've got a massive amount of Band A properties, but we aren't creating the type of housing that people who aspire to live in can live in. So, we've got all these graduates that we're losing. We've got young professionals that we're losing. We've got families that we're losing, like not necessarily to Manchester, but, to the likes of like McGull and Prescott and other places around the city region. Now, I want those people to stay in Liverpool for 2 reasons. One, because it gets us a good return in terms of the council tax, but actually because they're going to be the job occupiers and the job creators of the future. So I think we need to think about that a little bit, but I don't disagree with where we're at that at the moment. And the last thing, and probably the thing that I'm most excited about, is the King's development. So I think it's the complete right thing for the city. I think it'll be transformative in terms of the city's skyline and what we offer. And I think that's probably the project at the moment that I look at and think, this is the city saying that it's big, bold and ambitious. And that's exactly what I want. I want the city to be forward looking, to not look necessarily all the time to the past, but to appreciate the past and use it to our advantage to move forward into the future. That King's development is absolutely perfect in doing that. What I would probably want to do is work closer with some of the private sector on that to get some of the things that they need motoring ahead.
Let me just move the conversation on a little in terms of perhaps some of the issues that I know that you've been very exercised in highlighting over the past couple of months during what I have to say is very impressive TikTok campaign, Carl. Car parking and the hospitality sector.
Yeah.
Now, you may not naturally link those 2 issues, but you will know, as I do, that many people in the city centre, particularly I think it's fair to say in areas such as Hope Street and Duke Street, have found that real challenge. Now, there's 2 aspects to this that I'd like you to just talk us through. One, obviously, is that those car parking charges are seen as an income generator for a council that isn't blessed with massive amounts of cash. So do you have any sympathy with that approach, and how do we plug the gap? But also, from a business perspective, that is a bit of a nightmare for people. As I say, you've been talking to a lot of the restaurant and bar owners down there. So perhaps just talk us through that particular issue, which is not the biggest one in the world, but certainly something, as I say, that's impacting on the city centre, and what the Liberal Democrat approach would be to it.
Yeah. No, I think it's I think you put that perfectly, Frank, because you wouldn't necessarily link car parking with the hospitality, but I think me and you both know that it is intrinsically linked in this city because we haven't got good transport links, and we just are a massively car-driven city at the moment. Now, I'm not saying that should stay the same. I'm saying that we should try to move away from that, but you can't just implement something and think, the knock-on effect of this, well, people will all of a sudden get public transport, because we both know that exactly like they're getting the ghost train. But we both know that human nature doesn't work in that way as well. So I have got sympathy with the council in that, because I know that councils have been cut to the bone, and it's not as if they've got, Reform would like you to believe this, that they've got all this money sloshing about, but it's just simply not the case, and we both know that. So I do sympathise with that. Where I don't sympathise is where I believe this is driven by ideology rather than actual monetary policy, or
more an anti-car agenda.
Yeah, 100%. So it's fundamentally anti-car, and there's people that me and you know, Frank, that we could probably point to that has made sure this was implemented.
Don't be throwing me under the bus.
No, I've never dreamed of it. Yeah, don't be throwing me under the car. I love that, actually. That should be the thumbnail on this podcast. I love that. But so with the ideology within the council, and it's not every council, by the way, it's just a certain amount of them, you know, they are anti-car, and fundamentally, I would say anti-business. Because they haven't really spoken to the business leaders in the city about this. They certainly haven't listened to the consultation, because I think it was 90% said don't do it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're crippling what is already a struggling industry in terms of hospitality, because this is where we might disagree, Frank. Actually, I think we probably will agree, but the Labour government has absolutely rinsed hospitality at the moment. You know, they're not like listening to them on VAT, business rates, and now the local authority is putting this pressure on them in terms of, you know, decreasing footfall because of these car parking charges. So I think it's ideological rather than about the money. And the thing is, Frank, if you look at the papers that the council produced itself, it says this is part of our agenda to get cars off the road. But then within the same paper, I believe it's in the same paper, it says this is part of the council's income generation programme, which we hope will raise 20 million over a certain amount of time. Now, those two things can't be true, can it? Because how are you going to generate that income if you haven't got the cars coming into park because you want a car-free city? Now, I have challenged that, and I know there's other business leaders challenging that. What the Lib Dems will do is scrap that as soon as we come into office. Now, the pragmatist in me hopes that we won't have to wait a year, because there's certain businesses in this city, certain hotels and restaurants that can't survive for a year with the decreased footfall. So the pragmatist in me hopes that we can change that, even if it's a slight concession now. What I can assure people, what I can assure businesses of, is that a Liberal Democrat administration would scrap that as soon as we came into office.
I think you're right in terms of highlighting the pressure that the hospitality sector's under, and that you are aware of the fact that Downtown, in association with the Liverpool big company, have mounted a campaign to say to the government, you need to look at measures which can start to alleviate some of those pressures, because for cities like Liverpool in particular, which is so heavily reliant on the visitor economy, you know, a business closes its job, it's the business itself, of course, and the owner, and then the knock-on effect is a city centre that doesn't feel as vibrant. And you know, one of the great things that we should be proud of over the past 20 years or so is that Liverpool has become a focus for visitors, and so we need to maintain a good leisure offer. So hopefully the council will look at that problem as far as car parking is concerned, but more importantly, perhaps the government needs to start to look at the bigger picture as well.
Definitely.
You mentioned reform, and I think rightly indicated that one or two things they suggest are not necessarily the case. So we've seen reform take control of councils elsewhere in the country, where they promised to find literally millions of pounds worth of waste, only to end up putting council tax up because that waste wasn't actually there, it wasn't a reality. But there does appear, Carl, and this is something that I think can concern, you know, mainstream political parties, if I can put it that way, across the spectrum, that people aren't really listening. It's the simple answer, the simple solution, the populist message. What can Labour, then Conservatives do to combat that simplistic politics?
Yeah, I think we're probably both equally as concerned about this, Frank, aren't we? As people who, you know, regardless of political background, want to see like actual decent progressive like competent government, regardless of who that actually might be. And I think with the two extremes at the moment, you simply won't get that. I know there's a lot of people who think reform will come in and do fundamental change. I think it's all bluff, but fundamentally, because it's this populist idea, isn't it, that like everything in the past was so good, why can't we just go back to that? Well, time moves on, and the world's not the same as it was 50 years ago.
By the way, it wasn't all that great, was it?
No, everyone looks through roses.
There's a prefab back there, mouse ridden, so it wasn't that fantastic. But yeah, go on.
So I grew up in a prefab as well, by the way. With reform and with the Greens as well, to an extent, I think the problem with, I was talking about this earlier, the problem with their supporters is that regardless of what you say about their leaders, they've drank the Kool-Aid. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So for me, there's nothing you can really say. It's just having a great and coherent message yourself that combats that. And I think it's all about message and messenger. So the messenger is just as important. And that's why, I think my personal view, regardless of what Keir Starmer says, it's not going to land, because, he might be a good administrator. He's not a good messenger. And I know Burnham probably lends himself more to being a good and competent messenger. But I was thinking about this the other day, Frank, and it'd be interesting to hear what you think about this. This isn't Liberal Democrat policy, by the way, but I would like it to be. So I think kind of the centre-left, broad kind of ground needs to think of a really kind of exciting idea that gets people going, hang on a minute, like that's achievable and it would impact my life. So I talk about tax and the fact that tax has never been so high on people and businesses as well. And people feel like they're paying more and more tax, but getting less and less back for it. And then we've got two extremes. One in the form of reform that says, we're going to scrap all this tax for millionaires. How are you going to do that? And then one in the form of Zach Polanski and the Greens, who says, the answer is to just tax millionaires, which again, will lead to, I don't think can be done, and will also lead to many millionaires and wealth creators leaving the country. So what can you say from the centre that's actually exciting? Now, I think you can say, well, they're talking about taxing these people's wealth that we could never imagine. These are talking about tax break for all these millionaires. What about the normal everyday person who feels that burden more than anyone? And what I think we should be saying is we should have a tax-free personal allowance of £25,000. So if you're on the minimum wage or the first £25,000 of anyone's wage, you shouldn't pay tax on. And what that would do is two things. It would make people feel that like effect in their own pocket. But I think for business, it would take a lot of the burden and the administrative burden off them in terms of, paying minimum wage, paying people who are on minimum wages, national insurance contributions, which is crippling businesses at the moment. And it would make businesses more likely to take on those young people in those national minimum wage jobs. Now, that the financial figures need to be done on that, Frank, and I'm certainly not the person to do it, but that is something that's on my mind at the moment, and I think that's part of an answer that'll get the everyday person who works, on a job between like 25, 40 grand going, I quite like what they're saying on this, it's actually going to affect me. But at the moment, everything that the centre and the centre left is saying doesn't really affect the everyday person's life.
I think there is a huge vacuum in terms of big ideas.
Yeah.
And when you try to address populism, which, as I say, is a simplistic form of politics, which is at the moment effective, it's difficult unless you've got bold plans yourself.
Yeah.
Come about that way. Now, again, I don't know the numbers on that suggestion, but I think it's those sort of conversations that need to start to take place. I think the other interesting thing about Burnham's candidacy is clearly he's Labour's most popular retail politician.
Yeah.
There's no question whether you love them all over them and you're in the north of England. That is an absolute fact. All the poll numbers tell you that. Yeah. And I actually think he'll win the Makerfield seat and prove, to be the anecdote in a sense to reform. But one of the things that Andy's spoken about for a long time now is electoral reform and proportional representation.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at the way in which the country's transitioned from largely a two-party political state, with the Liberal Democrats being the place where you go to cast your protest vote, you're now talking about 5 in England and 7 across the UK, because you got Plaid and you got the SNP. You've then also got fringe parties like your party, bunch of fucking lunatics that way. Then you've got, on the other spectrum, the guy Rupert Lowe, again, another bunch of lunatics from the right. So all of a sudden you got this fragmentation. I think Alidy's got a point in saying the idea that, you know, any government can command the sort of leeway you require to create longer term plans with 33% of the vote. Okay, it might give you a landslide in Parliament.
Yeah.
But I think it was described as a loveless landslide.
Yeah.
I think that's where Andy Burnham has got a point. And it's that sort of area, I think, where you could start to see the Lib Dems, Labour, even some parts of the Conservative Party, to be honest, coalesce around the programme, that you're not going to agree on everything, but there's enough to agree on for people to say, actually, yeah, let's stick with the mainstream.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we do go, I think, into a period where the lunatics take over the asylum. Yeah. And sadly, the people who are going to be hit hardest by that are their supporters. We've seen that with Brexit, didn't we?
Yeah, 100%. But I couldn't agree more, Frank. As you can imagine, as a Liberal Democrat as well, my question would be, so I think Burnham does, if Burnham's going to come in, so if he's going to win that election and then subsequently going to win the Labour leadership election, if that happens, I think he does need to come in with some big ideas. I mean, he's got the personality. He needs to come in with some big ideas. I question, and it might be worth having a little bit of a bet on this, I question whether he would follow through with that once he becomes Prime Minister. I hope he would, because I think what it would do was it would dispel the myth that all politicians are the same. Because it's true though, isn't it? If he comes in and goes, do you know what, even though I command a massive majority in Parliament now, the next general election is going to be held through a PR system, and then we'll see what happens. But what I think will happen, Frank, because there's I hate myself for saying this, by the way, because I hate people bunching the left together, or bunching the centre and the left together as this collective blob of like, we're all the same, we're just a different colour, which is just fundamentally untrue, isn't it? You know, like liberalism, being a social democrat, being a socialist, is all very, very different creeds. And like, I'm a liberal fundamentally, that's what I am. So I hate myself saying this, but there is that progressive majority throughout this country, isn't there? I think the vast majority of people would actually prefer like a centre-left government, probably led by the Labour Party. If something drastic happens and we end up being the leader of something like that, then obviously that would be what I would prefer. But I do think that ultimately Labour will benefit from that. And I hope, my sincere hope is that Burnham will recognise that. And if he is leader of the Labour Party and he is Prime Minister, he will actually follow through on that promise.
I think, to be fair to him, you know, he's advocated electoral reform for a long time, and of course mayoral elections are fought under a different voting system, which again I think is madness. I also have heard a suggestion, not sure whether this is true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me, is that if we do want to ever rejoin the European Union, they would insist on and proposed system, because of course our Europe is based on that way. The big argument in the past against PR, forced on representation, has always been it will create instability. And unfortunately for the first past the post advocates, that argument's gone. Like, you can't
look at the current
set the prime ministers, which is where we're heading to in 10 years, and suggest that first past the post gives you stability. So as you can tell, I guess, I'm quite open to a conversation about PR and electoral reform. I've been very sympathetic to it in the past, probably more in favour of it now. But let's move back into where your focus is at the moment, and that obviously is Liverpool and the local political situation. You've spoken about, you know, engagement with business, getting close to the people who you see are the job creators, the wealth creators in the city, in the city region. Many people listening to this podcast, downtown members, will applaud that. I think what we see as an organisation, forget the party political colours for a second, is that where you create strong public-private sector partnerships, that's where you get biggest bang for your buck. But also I'm interested to hear your views on Liverpool's ability to attract investment, both indigenous, so helping those local companies grow, but also international and inward investment.
Yeah. So I completely agree. So the best, and I'm going to say this, Arnie, but the best public-private sector partnership in Liverpool in recent history was Liverpool One, and what we created. So there's people throughout my time as leader of the Liberal Democrats in Liverpool that will come to me and say, Carl, like I'm a Labour man, but the Lib Dems were the best administration that this city ever had, and like we had a lot of people lend their vote to us for that reason. I remember meeting someone at a parliamentary reception that you actually organised, and she said she worked for the council, and she was like, I was always Labour, my family was always Labour, but when I seen what you were doing in the council, it made me vote Lib Dem in the local elections. I didn't ask her about the general election. That's none of my business, I said. But it shows you like the impact that amazing kind of partnership with the private sector actually had. And look, we've seen Liverpool before Liverpool One was there and after. It's a significantly better city and a better place. So in terms of where I see our positioning with business and making sure that we work closely with business, I think Liverpool's problem, it was attracting in with investment, wasn't it? So Liverpool's problem is that we don't send our big hitters across the world, and I don't really understand why that's the case. So I think I heard something recently where the city region, or maybe the council, were going to some sort of conference, and they were sending all these public sector bureaucrats, probably at a very high cost to the taxpayer, to this conference. Whereas I think if it was me in that hot seat, I'd be going, where's the Frank McKennas of the world just to do this? Where's the Frank McKennas of the world? Where's the big hitters in Liverpool? Where are the Monterex lads? Like all the people that big businesses will look at and go, wow, like I know Monterex, or I know this brand, I know Arn from the Liverpool City region. Like I know them. Like maybe Liverpool is the place to go and invest. And I think that needs to be flipped on its head, Frank. And sometimes, you get a bit of stick if you say, actually it's the businesses that should be going and representing the city, not like the public sector. But fundamentally, it's the businesses that impress people. Do you know what I mean? So, I'd go myself, to the likes of these places, or if we're going to go to America to attract inward investment, or go to the European cities to attract inward investment. But I actually think my priority would be to send the businesses there to dazzle some of the people across the world. Because, me and you both know the thing that Liverpool has got that actually probably most of the cities that aren't London have got is its brand. Like, brand Liverpool is massive around the world, and we need to sell that so much better than what we are now. Well, who better to sell it than the business people who actually made a success of themselves in Liverpool, not just some back office bureaucrat who's not going to excite anyone. So I think there's a big learning curve there for how we do business differently with the rest of the world.
Okay. You talked about the Liberal Democrat administration back in the days of Liverpool One. I think I've told you this before. We used to say in Millbank, which is Labour's headquarters in London, that the Lib Dem Council was the best new Labour council in the country at the time. So I couldn't really disagree with an awful lot of people too. It's been great to have a chat to you today. I know, as I say, it's campaign mode, and you'll be with us, I'm sure, at various events and so on over the next few months, talking about some of the issues that arise and giving us the opportunity for our downtown members to address you and engage with you as well. So we look forward to that. But is there any other issues that you feel people should be thinking about as we head towards next year, and it'll soon be here, or our elections at the City Council, because there'll be change one way or the other, won't there?
It's huge. And I think My pitch would be, Frank, that the Labour Party is finished in Liverpool. You're seeing that from the local elections. I think it's the choice of who will replace them. Now, I think Reform can't win Liverpool, but will be fundamentally bad for our city. I think the Greens would be bad for business and, infiltrated in many ways by some of the Corbynistas on the left. So the option that can run as a proven track record of running this city and can run the city again is the Liberal Democrats. And I want to do that. I want to lead this city, despite what others have said to me about go to Parliament, do something different, it'll be easier. I want to run this city because I love this city. And I think this city's got so much potential. It's great when you speak to people like yourself, Frank, you speak to some of the businessmen and women that I've been speaking to recently. They love this city and they believe in this city. And we just need to make the people believe in this city again. I fundamentally believe that we can do that, but it's got to take a Dem administration.
Well, that's a party political broadcast. Great to have you.
Nice one.
Spend some time with us. As I say, we've got lots of things coming up and I'm going to go engage with some of them. But really interested to hear your thoughts. And as you say, you and I won't agree on everything. But this isn't about me, Downtown in Business, as you know, non-political organisation. And it's great that you want to engage with our members. So thank you for coming into the Downtown.
Nice one. Cheers. Thank you.